gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Who gon' take it there? Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
So I wanted to highlight something from Tim Dillon's most recent special. This was a special that came out, I don't know, sometime last week. I talked about it previously on the podcast and said I thought the special was halfway decent, but Tim Dillon is just such a questionable figure. And like most of these guys who are on the right, he seems dedicated to proving that over and over again, that like he's not really to be trusted. He just did a podcast with Candace Owens. Again, not even the first time he did it. He's done podcasts with Steve Bannon. So he seems to have some interest in cozying up with these people, these right-wing people. And I think there's a genuine curiosity to him that I think a lot of other people don't have. And you see it in his comedy too. It's part of what I like about some comedians is a little bit of curiosity and sort of like working out the world in real time. However, Tim seems to be fascinated with these grifter types, and there's probably a part of him that's fascinated with the business model of it. And at this point, I mean, he has built his business model the same way, by appealing to that same audience, doing interviews with those people, and more often than not, he is pretty much just giving credence directly to their talking points. You know what I mean? That seems to be mostly what he agrees with, and he seems to be one of these guys who kind of vaguely agrees with the populism of Trump, right? The vague populism of Steve Bannon and Trump and the whole movement. It's like this, it allows you as a very rich person to say, well, I support the downtrodden, and look, the people of America are speaking out, they're standing up to the elites, blah, 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 whatever. Here's what you Democrats don't understand about the working class, but without having to really engage with any of the economics that create the dynamic that we're at, the inequality that we see. They don't really want to get into the nitty-gritty of why this inequality exists, because it would alienate too much of their audience, and it would alienate a lot of the rich people that they want to be cavorting with. And that, above all, seems to be Tim Dillon's motivation, is he wants to be at the table with these people. He wants to be friends with them. He talks about it all the time, and that's become kind of the running bit amongst him and his friends, is that like Tim's Hollywood now, Tim hangs out with Steve Bannon now. He's one of the elites, and he is. I mean, in as far as elites exist, Tim Dillon is one of them, and the right-wing's fear of content creators and propagandists and whoever you may have, all of them are more elite than anybody in the Democratic Party or on the left at this point. And so the more and more you hear them talk about the elites and things like that, the less and less credibility they're going to have. So I want to play a couple clips here. The first is a large chunk of Tim Dillon's special that he used to talk about RFK Jr. He does, it's like mostly not even a bit. There's some jokes in there, but he seemed to just want to tell this story about being friends with RFK. And I just thought that was interesting that he spent so much time on that. And it does show how he thinks a little bit, or maybe how little he thinks. But it also shows that of all these people that Tim Dillon has sort of associated himself with, whether it's Candace Owens or Steve Bannon or J.D. Vance, RFK seems to be the one that he can land on and say, I support this. This is what I agree with. This is the type of politics that I agree with. So in as far as you could get any accurate assessment of where Tim Dillon stands on the issues, I think mostly agreeing with RFK is about as close as you can get, and even that is fairly vague and nebulous, right? I mean, RFK he ran as a Democrat and then switched to the Republican Party, switched to independent, and ended up in Trump's cabinet. So, you know, how much does this guy really stand for? If he had gotten further in the Democratic electorate process, then he probably would be taking more positions that are completely incompatible with being in a Trump administration, and talking about threats to democracy, and correctly pointing out all of the erosions of institutions that Donald Trump has taken part in. But since Donald Trump is the easiest politician for him to cozy up to, he's now taking part in the degradation of those institutions. And I'm not saying that he wouldn't have done that anyway. That seems to be his ideological goal, and that's what Tim Dillon talks about here. But, you know, if he had been embraced by the Democratic Party, not saying that's what should have happened, but if it had happened, he probably would have gone a different direction in terms of what his politics look like. So this is not a very principled guy. You could argue that he has this singular goal, which is to make America healthy again. And so he doesn't care which party is going to allow him to do it. He's going to go with the party that's going to give him power. Essentially, that's what it comes down to. And the people that like him would argue that it's about making America healthy and phasing out red dye 40 and other things like that. And that, I will say, is that's the only thing RFK Jr. has said so far that I think makes any sense, is talking about getting rid of certain things that are in our food, like red dye 40 and things, carcinogens and stuff that we have come to just take it as normal, that this stuff is in our food. Now, the thing is that the only way to do that is to regulate. And when RFK Jr. says he's going to phase out red dye 40, what he's talking about is regulating companies to make it so that they can't put it in there. So that's great. That's what I want, is regulation of companies. The problem is that how much room is there to actually do that in a Trump administration, where, you know, apparently, according to RFK, he has been given like full control of the HHS. And so it seems that he has a lot of power. But at what point is the Trump administration's fundamental opposition to regulating any companies, unless it's over like wokeness or opposition to Israel, at what point is that going to get in the way of RFK and his noble crusade to regulate food companies? If he can get away with regulating food companies while in the Trump administration, that's great. I'm skeptical as to whether or not he's going to be able to do that, or whether or not that's his actual intention, given the fact that being in the Trump administration is contradictory to that end goal. However, I think what's more relevant about RFK at the moment, although I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about him, he seems to want to be front and center in terms of this health agenda of his. But what has made more headlines recently is the things that he has said about autism. And he has talked about how he wants to create a registry of autistic people. He characterized autistic people as essentially being completely unable to function in society at all, which not only is untrue, but it's also kind of the way that people talk about a subset of society that they want to get rid of or purge, especially when you start talking about making some kind of public registry or even a non-public registry of people who have those conditions. You know, this is eugenics type of stuff. And so that's the direction that it seems like RFK Jr. is going, especially in the context of a Trump administration, which already is speaking in terms of eugenics and embracing eugenics in various ways. And so that, I think, when all is said and done, regardless of how far he gets in this crusade specifically against autism, I think that's going to be the defining legacy of RFK Jr. That's going to be the thing that we talk about in the present tense and will talk about in the past tense, is that he seems to be going after autistic people. And for some reason, Tim Dillon feels like this guy is the one to place his bets on and to attach his credibility to. So let me play a little bit from this Netflix special of his, and then I will also play another clip from a show called Story Wars, where he makes another little joke about RFK, which I think just ties everything together here.
I don't have any friends in LA. I'm just friends with RFK and his wife. And that's all I need. That's all I need. Yeah, they're amazing. His wife Cheryl is the actress from Curb Your Enthusiasm. She's so sweet and optimistic, and, you know, he's less optimistic because the CIA killed his whole family. He's a little bit of a downer, you know. They killed everyone he ever met. They would like shoot his dog in the head and then look at him and go, "Man, it sucks your dog drowned." But I like going to dinner with them because they're an odd couple. They're a fun couple, they're an odd couple. You know, because you'll go to dinner with them and she's like, "I love strawberries." And he's like, "There's a bomb in the car." "Cheryl, don't the skin off your face, Cheryl. You're gonna die a horrible death, like everyone I've ever met, Cheryl. This is a true story. When Trump nominated him, I was in Palm Beach, and I had brunch with him and her at Dr. Oz's house. It's fun, and I'm sitting there, and he goes, play what he did. It's fun. And I'm like, we don't, it's fine. And then he plays my impression of him at the table for everyone. And everyone's laughing. And he's like, it's good. And I was like, this guy is kind of cool, That's a cool thing to, He's gonna ban the cheesy gordita crunch, and then I'm gonna have to march. Like, fat people don't know what's coming. Like, he's serious. He's deadly serious about what... I mean, he's going after it all.
Greg, Tim, obviously brand new special right now, available on Netflix. I'm Your Mother. Incredible.
Thank you. Doing it.
Watch that now.
In the top 10 tonight.
It's 9, but we're getting beat right now by the Love on the Spectrum.
Yeah.
So go home and watch it, please. Let's put those autists in their place. RFK! RFK!
It's in the vaccines.
So in these two clips, in the first one, like I said, you have this long bit about RFK going to dinner with RFK Jr. and his wife. No mention of the infidelity, which honestly probably would have been funny to get into because I'm sure there were awkward moments around that. Instead, it's this kind of self-serving thing about how RFK let him play a video of him doing an impression of RFK. And I don't know, it all just kind of reeks of the type of privilege that these guys are always criticizing in everybody else and the type of sort of elite attitude. I mean, he's talking about having dinner with a famous actress and her politician Nepo baby son, who are now, or I should say who is now, one of the most powerful people in the country. And so at what point does this stop being populism and does it start being elitism? I think that point already happened, and I think a lot of people can see that we are far past that point by now. But at the same time, these guys seem to be riding high on this idea that they are the anti-establishment truth tellers, even though at this point they pretty much entirely comprise the establishment. But then in this other show called Story Wars, which is like just a funny game show, goofy kind of concept where they tell stories about each other. They're not all featuring people like Tim Dillon. It's hosted by a guy named Louis J. Gomez, who I think is also a little bit on the right-wing side, but it's still a relatively entertaining show. It's usually not a very political show at all. And so Tim Dillon saying this is a little bit of a deviation from the norm, but also I think this just shows that, Tim Dillon's fascination with RFK and RFK Jr.'s politics is not divorced from this autism crusade that he's trying to go on as well. And so the jokes that Tim makes about, fat people, cheesy gordita crunch, whatever, and how RFK Jr. is coming for all of that, I think that is kind of stark when you put it also in context of Tim acknowledging that RFK Jr. plans to go after autistic people as well. And, so what does that mean when you say RFK Jr. is coming for all that shit? He's serious. He's deadly serious. And then in this other joke, you acknowledge not just that RFK Jr. has some association with autism. He's fascinated with autism. He wants to solve autism or whatever. He's not saying that. He's saying he's coming after the autists. That's the joke that he's making there, in as far as it is a joke. So to me, this is Tim Dillon acknowledging that RFK Jr. is deadly serious about all of these things that he's talking about, whether it be banning the cheesy gordita crunch and he hasn't said that specifically, that's a joke, kind of a lazy joke from Tim, to be perfectly honest. And, this whole thing about, I don't know if he wants to eradicate autism. I don't know if he wants to put autistic people in the coal mines, which is something that I've heard some right-wingers talking about, or what the goal is here. Or if he thinks that he's going to sort of they probably want to create some type of tortured connection and start to create a bunch of fabricated paperwork that ties autism to vaccines. That's probably the goal here, is that they want to do whatever they have to do to finagle the science, to make it look like there's a basis for that theory so that they can keep building on that and building towards whatever their end goal is when it comes to autism. So that's mainly what I want to talk about here is what the shit that RFK Jr. is talking about with autism is, what it means, what it probably is going to look like in practice, and all the things that he gets wrong. And I wanted to talk to you about this, Kris, because you have an autistic son. You've dealt with somebody who has nonverbal autism, which is one of the more intense forms of autism. So when RFK Jr. is talking about people who will never hold a job, people who will never find love, whatever else he said, one of the people that he's talking about is Kris's son. And so I wanted to talk specifically to him about this issue and try to sort through some of this bullshit and figure out ways that we can brace ourselves for what's coming and potentially post some resistance against it as well.
First of all, I'd like to say fuck RFK for a lot of reasons, not the least of which that I do partially blame him for Trump's victory. His running independent and a very anti-Trump campaign, mind you, independent. He very likely could have split the vote from the people who are racist and sexist, and even though they didn't like Trump necessarily, wouldn't vote for a black woman. He would have given them an alternative. And then there are Republicans that normally always vote Republican, that don't necessarily like Trump but will never vote Democrat, that would have voted independent for him potentially. He's got the Kennedy name, and he has not any kind of charisma or swagger, but he carries himself a little more like a politician. So I could see him definitely splitting the vote that Trump got, not by a ton, but probably enough to bring Trump down and have the election, or have had the election go to the Democrats. So fuck him for dropping out and taking this cushy spot Trump offered him if he would drop out and endorse him. RFK is a fascinating individual. I highly recommend the 3-part Behind the Bastard series on his life. The man never had a chance in life. Growing up when he did as a Kennedy, watching all the death and craziness around his family from a young age on, having to deal with that, being, famous, having the whole world eyes on you growing up and stuff. It's no wonder he turned out into a fucking weirdo. And I would feel bad for him if he wasn't this womanizing, crazy, dangerous piece of shit. It's all right to have your crazy conspiracies. It's fine. That's, nothing wrong with that. But you should not be in charge of the HHS if you think vaccines are bad, if you think fluoride is used for mind control. If you believe every crazy conspiracy theory out there, you really shouldn't be able to affect any kind of public policy. And for every good thing he does, like getting rid of petroleum-based food dyes, there's going to be 12 bad things at least. I understand the want to find out what's going on, what's causing the sudden outbreak of autism we've seen over the last 20 years. But, when you look into things, you realize it's not a sudden break. There's a lot of things contributing to it. We're better at diagnosing things now. We label things differently. It's not necessarily that there is a huge number more, and I'm not going to get into all that stuff. But there's absolutely no evidence that vaccines cause autism. So when people talk about this, they're usually talking about these Wakefield studies that were done in 98, I believe. It was a while, or 98 or 2008, whatever the case. It was a long time ago. And that was this Dr. Wakefield. They studied, it was under 20 kids. It was not very many kids. And what he found in them is that they had this gut inflammation. And he theorized that caused, it was from the MMR vaccine, causes gut inflammation that could have produced a protein that then went to the brain, causing autism. No one's ever been able to back that study up. He's never found the protein. That was just a theory. There was another study he did that it was inconclusive, I believe. And then in Finland, they tried to do this. And they did it with like just under 500 kids. Didn't find any link to that. Didn't find any link to gut inflammation from the MMR vaccine. Or I'm sorry, that was the UK. And then Finland did a study of like nearly 2 million kids and couldn't find any links. But still, everyone has held on to this. Why do people hold on to this? Well, people want an answer. You want the best for your child. You want your child to have every opportunity, every advantage, no disadvantages, no disabilities, of course. And when you find out your child is autistic, especially if it's on the extreme level, like nonverbal autistic, like my son, it hurts. You don't want them to have a difficult life, and you want them to be able to experience the full range of things we can as a human. So you're upset. You don't want to blame yourself for your genetics. You want to find an enemy. You want to say it's this person's fault. This doctor, this scientist messed my kid up. I get it. It's perfectly natural. I'm sure I went through a phase like that. But there is no medical basis for this. And even if there was, say vaccines caused autism in 1 in 100 kids. Well, that's still probably better than, millions of people dying from measles, mumps, and rubella, or whatever, whatever you're vaccinating against. Autistic people are still people. They still have lives. They're still, they may not, depending on where they are on the spectrum, be able to do as much. And it breaks my heart more than anything in the world that my son will never be able to pay taxes. But there's other things he can do. The kind of extreme autism he's talking about, too, where they won't be able to hold down a job, they won't be able to experience a romantic relationship, and so on, is about 26.7% of autistic children by the latest studies. So right around a quarter of them, which, is a large percentage. But when you look at how many millions or billions of autistic people there are, that means there's 70% that are just the quirky, cute, Big Bang Theory, love on the spectrum people that, yes, they definitely have their own difficulties and stuff too. I'm not trying to belittle their trouble, but they can experience a wide range of things as well. But everyone on the spectrum deserves the chance to exist and lead a life. I could stomach this a lot better if it felt like, he was doing this in good faith, that he actually cared for autistic children or the families of the quarter of autistic children that are quote unquote profoundly autistic. But when you're a part of an administration that is cutting the funding of the DOE, who is traditionally the largest funder for autism research, as well as the DOD and the NSF, all large contributors to actual funding of scientific research to help us understand autism, where it comes from, and if it is preventable, cutting funding to that, while at the same time talking about making a national registry of autistic children, that is straight up Nazi shit. Like, there's no two ways about that. And it's very clear RFK Jr. is interested a lot more in eugenics than he is actually helping families of autistic children. RFK said, autism destroys families. Yes, raising an autistic child is tough, especially a quote-unquote profoundly autistic child. But I looked up the numbers, and it's really not much worse than anything else. It looks right now like 23% of people with severely autistic children, their relationships end in divorce. Now, we don't know what other contributing factors there are to that, but that's the number there, versus 13% of children without disabilities. Keep in mind, there's a lot of disabilities that children can have that put strains on relationships. Children, and 13% of parents with kids still end up divorced. The divorce rate in America is somewhere between 40 and 50% right now, and it's been dropping steadily since we allowed gay marriage. That's, a very different topic. But Suffice to say, it's just another piece of misinformation from RFK. Yes, raising a child with special needs is difficult. So is raising a child. Raising children is difficult. The idea that RFK wants to make a national list and eradicate autism by largely, it seems, eliminating vaccines. It just seems like an excuse for him to try and act like he is looking out for the good of the American people. It gives him an excuse to say that's what he's doing to attack vaccines, something he's always wanted to do, something he's always had a problem with, something he's already screwed up very badly in the Samoan Islands. And it's just ridiculous that we even have to be in a place where this man is in charge of the HHS. It makes me sick to my stomach, and it is one of my biggest fears for the future with my son. Not him not being able to pay taxes or write a poem, but for him to have to live in a country where a fascistic, paranoid, opportunistic, eugenics fan, crazy conspiracy theorist is in charge of the HHS. There's more I could say on this, but it is really hard to even fathom how we got to this point, and that this is something I have to worry about on top of everything else with the Trump administration. Autism doesn't destroy families. Misinformation and bad science from bad actors and fascist, crazy conspiracy theorists like him, that destroys families. Horrible diseases that kill children because they weren't vaccinated, that destroys families. The Trump administration destroys families, not autism.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And if you really want to support, consider becoming a member. That's the best way to support this channel. Posting all kinds of content there, like book reviews, movie reviews, music. If you like the beats that play in the back of these podcasts, all of that's posted there. Plus my EPs. I just dropped a new EP called Dead Internet Theory. That's available on all streaming platforms, and that was available first for members only. So if you want access to that, become a member. And if there's other stuff that you'd like to see as members only content, let me know and we'll figure some things out.